So typically, the way we marry the cattle and the sheep is we have a 1.5 acre holding pen, and typically we only get anywhere from 15 to 20 open yearling heifers, and we try to do like a 2-to-1 ratio of cattle to sheep, and we'll put them in this holding pen together. Typically, sometimes it can happen in a day, sometimes it's two days. And we introduce them together, and they'll kind of chase each other around for a little bit. We feed them a couple times together. We'll get some sweet feed. And eventually, the chasing kind of ends, and they decide, we eat together. And after that, it's kind of smooth sailing. Kind of what we use for fencing. A lot of the fields out here actually have a solid border fence. So that's kind of helpful when we are in a field that does have a solid border fence. When for the cross fences, we use just like a typical poly wire or turbo wire. And kind of to start, usually the yearlings are really good. It's the sheep that kind of give you the trouble. So when I do start, I'll double poly wire, 2 hot wires. I'll kind of keep them lower, one a little bit higher, just so the yearlings don't just walk over it, but then we'll put one really low to the ground. And usually after a week, the sheep kind of realize that, this is a hot fence. We can't go through this fence without getting shocked. And then I'm actually able to just go down to 1 poly wire kind of in the middle. And usually there's not any problems. Sometimes if there's a storm or something, or they get riled up for some reason, there might be a couple sheep out. But usually they respect the fence. In terms of moving daily, right away it's a little bit of a struggle, just because they're coming from situations probably where they don't do that every day. So you kind of have to take your time with them. I'll take down 3 or 4 posts, which ends up being almost half the field, and pulling back the wire, and as smoothly as I can, and slowly as I can, as calmly as I can, will shift them to that next cell. And that usually takes a week or 2. But once they start understanding that, every day we're moving, sometimes it's as easy as I open up the gate. I don't even have to take down a post. I'll let them know that, hey, we're moving. Sometimes they see me and know they're moving, and eventually they just walk in themselves. And then at that point, the rest of the year is pretty simple. They hear me start up the side-by-side with the water trailer hooked up, and they're there, ready to go. Typically, we do graze a lot of different forages out here. We actually have a scale that we implement where we weigh our livestock after every forage type. And I would say usually we're weighing about 7 times. Some of the forages that we do graze, we always have a perennial field at Minokan Farm. We include perennials in our crop rotation, so that's been huge for us on the livestock side. On a good year, we're going to be able to graze that perennial a couple of times. We do also graze full season cover crops and crop residue, crop aftermath grazing. And then if we're lucky, early in the spring, we'll actually get a really early graze on like a winter rye or a winter rye and camelina mix. And that's been really good for us. Especially on a year like this year when we kind of had, I want to call it a wet year, but in reality it was just an average moisture year. We had a lot of biomass, and typically in a grazing situation where you're rotationally grazing, you're going to want to utilize about 50%. This year with the concentration of sheep and cattle that we had, and about 1/3 of an acre per day, we were actually getting a lot more trampling effect. So we were probably only utilizing, about 70%. And when I say utilizing it, we're actually utilizing the whole plant, but that animal is probably only getting the top 30% of that plant. But the sheep, they're such great tramplers because they're very concentrated, and I'm not sure if it's because of the small hoof, but they kind of stay in a tight flock, and when they move, they just when you look at it you know, when you're not walking in it and you look at it from the side, it looks like, oh man, I really overgrazed. It's just flat down pressed. But then when you walk out there and start lifting up some of these plants that are pressed on the ground, you realize, well, I'm only grazing 30%, but all of these plants now are being put back into the soil, and you're building your soils, you know, with the trampling. And I mean, cattle do a good job trampling too, but sheep, I don't think you're going to find a better animal for trampling.